Welcome to another course, talking with Scott Lomu, president of Element United. In this course, we're going to specifically drill down and talk about carbon credits, carbon offsets, what's the difference between them, most importantly, what is Element United doing to help with their blockchain products.
Great.
Scott, let's maybe start out by talking about how and why mining is one of the biggest culprits to pollution today.
Mining is responsible for about half of all the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today.
Even more than
Half.
driving our cars.
Yeah, mining is it's incredible.
Wow.
How much how much mining contributes to the carbon that exists out there right now.
Is that just because of the equipment that they're using, or the lack of trees that it's resulting in?
It's both, actually. It's because of all the biggest. If you were to drive out to one of these big mines out here, Kennecott, the biggest vehicles in the world are there.
Yeah,
you might have seen them coming out. Driving down the freeway, you see one of these tires that's as big as 4 cars. So it's not just because of the amount of pollution that the actual extraction costs, but a lot of it because of the type of mining has to do with the destruction of trees. And that was the type of mining that I did when I mined out in West Africa. I had to tear down a lot of trees, and it's done all over the Amazon. If you look at Google images of a gold mine in the Amazon, and it is thick forest, and it's just gutted. It's turned into what looks like the surface of the moon. So yeah, half of all the carbon pollution is from the mining industry, which is a really shocking statistic.
And it was interesting. I was listening literally this morning to your community call, and you were talking about mangroves. It's not just trees. It's any plants that.
Sure. Yeah. It's any plants that produce that offset the carbon dioxide, and if you destroy that, you're taking away a lot of the offset, a lot of what the oxygen that helps with the environment. And mining destroys the environment. It's true. Now there are ways to fix that, and not all miners are evil and are doing it with destruction of the environment in mind as their first goal.
Right.
but it's a byproduct of what happens in the mining world.
Okay, so let's talk about what is a carbon credit.
Okay, so carbon credits and carbon offsets are a way for governments and a way for companies to offset their carbon footprint. So if you look at an airline, or if you look at a mining company, there's a lot of environmental destruction. There's a lot of carbon that's produced from the activities of cars, airplanes, mining activities. And so an offset is a way to literally offset. So if they produce 1 ton, which it's measured in tons, 1 ton of carbon, an offset represents 1 ton of whatever the mechanism is, whether it's trees or forestry, nurseries, mangroves.
This is things that they're doing to plant these trees?
Yes, these are things that are offsetting
right.
the amount of pollution that a country or a company is creating through their means of production.
So when a company has a goal to be net zero, they're basically saying, for all the bad that we're doing, we've got to do as much good to offset it to net zero.
That's right, because planting trees will offset the carbon production of a business. And so if a company says we're going to be net zero, they'll do a detailed calculation on what their carbon footprint is annually, measured in tons. And so if they're 1 million tons of carbon, they have to invest in or create 1 million tons of offset. So there are companies out there that are creating these carbon credits, these carbon offsets, and these businesses are buying those credits.
Okay.
Or another way is, if a company says, okay, our goal is to be under 1 million metric tons of carbon, and they only do 800,000, now they've got 200,000 offsets they can sell to another company.
Okay.
So that's one way, but really what we're focusing on is what can we do to create the offset to then sell to other companies and countries. And this is a massive market right now, because every company in every country has a commitment to be carbon neutral.
Now, is this a government mandated thing?
It's
Is this
both.
a consumer driven thing?
There's what's called the mandatory market and the voluntary market. The mandatory market, if a government comes out and says all of this industry must be carbon neutral by, that's the mandatory market. Then they have to go out and buy on this, you know, mandatory market. The voluntary market is because there's a movement. People want to offset it, right? There's this awareness of what's actually happening with global warming and environmental destruction. And so that's the voluntary market. And the voluntary market is exploding. It's booming right now because everybody, in fact, if you were to go to most websites of most big companies, what you'll see on the front page of their website is their carbon commitment.
Yep.
We plan to be carbon neutral by this date. And they're doing that by buying carbon credits.
So most businesses, tell me if I'm wrong, most businesses probably aren't creating their own good. They're only creating bad, so they go to other companies.
That's correct.
To buy the good.
That's right. Yeah. So
oversimplification.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to say it. They have to offset it by going into the voluntary market and buying these carbon credits that other companies are creating.
Right.
So they create it, they capture it, and then they buy it. And then the company says, okay, great. I have offset my carbon footprint with an equal amount of carbon credits that take me back to net zero or whatever they're going to call it.
And is this a global or a regional? Like if I'm a California business, does it matter if my trees are being grown in Peru?
No, because, you know, we live in a worldwide, this whole thing is, now some companies, like for example, we're doing some projects in Indonesia where there's a lot of coal mining. They want an Indonesian offset for an Indonesian problem.
Right.
But in general, no, a California company can buy offsets that are created in the Amazon.
Got it.
Right. As long as it's offsetting it, but that's more of a personal decision by these companies to where they'll say, well, no, let's offset it with a California offset. So maybe there's a project being produced in Northern California so that the guys in Southern California can buy it. But it's really just a preference.
Okay, so before we get into your blockchain solution, let's talk about maybe some experiences that haven't been great. What are some of the headlines that have happened recently around carbon offsets and some of the problems?
So there's a lot of fraud in the carbon offset world because companies are buying these carbon offsets and there's really no reliable data as to, is it really offsetting? That's called greenwashing. What was this carbon credit actually, is it actually doing what it's supposed to do by offsetting a 1 ton of carbon? And in a lot of cases, it's not. Just because of the function of it, there's no way to track it. There's no way to verify the information. There, you know, if they planted there's a nursery with a bunch of trees in it, how is that being tracked? Is that data reliable? Or is that carbon credit, was it already sold to somebody else? And so there's a lot of fraud going on right now because carbon credits are being double sold, or the carbon credit itself doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't produce enough oxygen to offset this carbon credit. And so there's a lot of mistrust right now in the carbon credit world. And so you've got this problem with everybody, companies and countries saying, okay, we're going to be carbon neutral. We're going to, look at us. We're taking care of the environment, but they're buying a product in a lot of cases that isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. There's a few pretty well-documented class action lawsuits right now from companies claiming to be, and we won't use their names, but because we might want them to buy our carbon credits. But and again, this wasn't their fault. They just happened to go out and buy these carbon credits that weren't reliable, that some of them had already been sold before. And so there's a big problem. So that, first of all, the carbon credit world is one of the most quickly growing industries on earth. It is projected to be like a $1.6 trillion industry by 2030. That's what, 7 years from now?
Yeah.
Last year, I think we did 30 billion in carbon credits and carbon offsets. It's supposed to explode because the entire world now, because of this movement, they want to, everybody who buys anything wants to make sure they're buying from a environmentally responsible company. So everybody's out there saying, we're going to be carbon neutral. but they're rushing out to buy a product that may or may not be real. This presents a massive, massive problem when you're out there. I mean, imagine if this happened in another industry where everybody was rushing to buy, something for your car and brake lines, and then the brake lines failed half the time, right? Most people would be like, oh my gosh, we got to do something about this. And so the same thing is happening in the carbon credit world right now. Everybody's committed to doing them, but the product itself has doubt and has questions. So that's where we can come in with a solution to solve that problem.
Sounds like a perfect opening for the solution. Tell us about it.
We are tokenizing carbon credits. And so what that means is all the problems that, let me back up real quick. So there was a process about 20 years ago called the Kimberley process, which was a way to get rid of blood diamonds. And these diamond mines had to certify through a KPC, a Kimberley process certificate, that the origin of that diamond was legitimate, that it was legal, that it wasn't, done by warlords trying to fund their next rebellion or with children, child slave labor. And so that was universally adopted by the world. Now the UN claims that 99.8% of all diamonds in the world are ethically harvested, meaning they're not blood diamonds. Well, that's a paper process, and that paper process is flawed. I've personally talked to many people in the diamond business who say they've never asked for a Kimberley process or Kimberley process certificate. And so the blockchain is essentially what we are attempting to do is to take the Kimberley process, which was address two issues, conflicts and diamonds, and expand that into anything that's mined and include environmental issues, more humanitarian issues. But this time we're going to put it on the blockchain, which can't be faked, which gives more clarity, which tracks data, which can be easily verified. And so we are tokenizing carbon credits and putting them on the blockchain. And that gives the buyers of these carbon credits surety that the information was input correctly, that the data is being tracked correctly, that the carbon credit is being verified, that it's not being double sold, that there's a transaction receipt that shows that this carbon credit is what it says it is, and that it's attached to a verified project. And so the tokenization of carbon credits eliminates the problems that exist in the carbon credit world today. And not only does it eliminate these problems, but it allows you to sell your carbon credit for a little bit more money. One of the things we would like to do is to add something else to the carbon credit, because these carbon credits are story driven. So if I'm a company and I'm in the carbon credit market, I want to know, what is this carbon credit? What is it? Tell me about the project supporting this carbon offset. And these are story driven. And so we have a really good story. Our story is we are trying to stop harmful mining and replacing the mining with a project that creates carbon credits, like a tree farm or a nursery, something along those lines, or these mangroves. So if we can do that and replace one destructive behavior with something that's the exact opposite, that actually does some good and provides more sustainable economy, then great. And the information is reliable. We're using what we call IoT devices, that's Internet of Things, that can track and input the data from these farms that allow people to know that when they buy a carbon credit from us, that it's a real project, that it's actually offsetting the carbon, and that it's doing good, that there's more than just the offset of the carbon. We're going to try to do some things with a couple of our projects that allow us to do something humanitarian, that maybe a portion of that carbon offset is dedicated to pull these kids out of these mines so that there's no more child labor. It'd basically be a sort of a subsidy that we can create. And so we're just trying to add something unique. So number one, let's solve the problems that exist in the carbon credit world, and then add something new, add something unique that's not currently being offered. I might have got a little ahead of myself.
No,
there,
I can
so
see
apologize.
the passion coming through. That's awesome. That's awesome. So who will be able to purchase these credits? Is it just businesses or is it individuals?
Right now, the biggest buyers are countries and companies. But the companies, especially these big Fortune 500 companies, they've all pledged, almost all of them, to offset their carbon. And so, but they just need to know what am I buying? Is this legitimate? What's the good that's being done? And so the market for carbon credits is massive. In fact, I don't think we can meet the demand right now because, especially moving forward, since there's all these pledges to be carbon neutral by X date, we need projects, and we need good ones that can be verified and that can be tracked and that offer something a little bit unique. And that's the proposal we have, is to create a carbon credit that offers something unique but has all the benefits of the blockchain, that it's traceable, verifiable, it's trusted, and all the things that the blockchain allows us to do.
Using nodes. So let's talk
Using
about nodes.
nodes.
How are these node owners participating in this fantastic mission?
This is all run through the blockchain that's powered by the nodes that you run. So again, this allows you to be a part of the solution. These blockchain, these NFTs are housed on the Element blockchain that you run. That's part that your nodes will be verifying information as these NFTs carbon credits are transferred and purchased. And so your nodes have a big role in this solution to the carbon credit market, and you're rewarded for it. That's why running a node is great, because you receive your reward for being a part of this solution, and it cannot happen without these nodes running to support your Element blockchain.
Now, you've had some meetings with some pretty influential people. Can you talk about
It's
who
been great.
or how this
I
is
can
being
give
received?
general. So it's being received extremely well. We are dealing with high-level government officials in countries all over Southeast Asia and in Africa. Africa is a little tricky because the governments haven't really come to a consensus. They're starting to now on how much they want to charge a percentage of the government for these carbon credits. And in some of these countries, they've been up in the 60 to 70%.
Oh, wow.
That's how much they want for it. Okay. So it doesn't give us the ability to incentivize
Right.
the actual farmer that's creating the carbon credit, or to us as a blockchain that wants to reward our people for participating. But they're coming around. A couple of big announcements were just announced last month, to where these countries in Central Africa are starting to now come into line with the rest of the world with how much they want to take off of these carbon credits. So we've met with government officials in Kenya and Tanzania and Indonesia. We've got appointments lined up with other East Asian countries and Africa, because it's a solution that they want. We're here to solve problems in their countries and to help them be a part of that solution. So, we gave a community update earlier, and Chris, who's out there running our Asia operations, what was his tagline? He said, "Everybody says yes."
Yes, I heard that.
He goes, yes after yes after yes, because we're not in there offering something that doesn't help them. We're in there creating a win-win for them. And that's the beauty of the blockchain, is that it creates incentive for our node owners, because they receive a reward, an incentive for these governments that now have a solution to these carbon credit projects that allows them and their countries to be a part of this big solution. I mentioned earlier, one of the projects that we're looking to do in East Asia, they have a lot of coal mines, and they want a local solution. They want carbon credits created in their own country to offset the problem that their country is creating. It's win-win.
Yeah.
And so it's great. We're making great progress with a lot of these countries, and we hope to be, the largest, if not one of the largest, tokenized carbon credit providers in the world. And we're even talking to companies that have already created their own carbon credits and their own offset, and then we just do the tokenization of it. We put it on, it'll go on the Element blockchain that you guys run, and it'll be great. Now we can offer a solution, not just creating offsets on our own, but working with others who are out there creating and want more visibility and reliability for the carbon credits that they're out there trying to sell.
So, I mean, this is just a perfect example of what you can do with blockchain that you couldn't do
I think
any other way.
It's one of the best uses of blockchain, because you look at the existing market and the problems in the market, and this is the perfect solution for these problems that exist out there.
Yeah.
Because it brings in more people, it brings trust into a business that's exploding. And there's people are hesitant. Now you've got these companies out there, because some of these lawsuits going, oh, I know I need to be carbon neutral, But am I buying something? Am I going to end up in a class action lawsuit like this guy and that guy?
Mm-hmm.
This solves the problem,
Right.
because it's trusted, verified, can't be faked. And the technology, everything's come together at this incredible time to where this technology exists for us to be able to provide a reliable solution.
So we talked in another video about how you can share Element by pulling up your phone and talking about the ingredients. Carbon offsets may be a little harder. What's an easy way to bring this conversation up as our Connect affiliates are sharing the story?
The carbon offset world now, it's coming to the individual. It's coming to the individual. For example, if you were to fly on a plane going overseas, odds are you're gonna be asked if you want to offset the carbon that your flight is.
I just saw that
Yeah.
recently.
And so now everybody's like, well, what is this?
Right.
Typically it was something between the carbon offset market and individual and big, larger companies and countries. But now everybody's asking the question, well, what does this mean if I'm being asked personally to offset my trip
Right.
to Holland? So the awareness of what a carbon offset is, and especially now that all these companies on their website talk about their climate pledge to be, carbon neutral by this date, more people are familiar with it, right? And so it allows us to be able to bring it up. And I always ask people the question, have you flown recently? Were you asked to offset? And sometimes people will say yes, but it allows me to talk about what that actually means. And then it's an easy segue into what the problem is and why blockchain solves that problem. And there'll be assets that you guys can send people to our website that talk a little bit about it. There's a lot of information on our website about what we're trying to do with the blockchain to help the carbon market.
Super interesting. I hope you guys found that really useful. I know I did. And remember, it's not just sharing in person. I mean, sharing this stuff on social media.
Yeah.
That's, a huge catalyst to a lot of these movements.
It is, because you can offer win-wins, right? The ability to do something good and to be rewarded for it, it exists here. And I know a lot of people claim that, right? Oh, hey, let's create a win-win. Study this. When you want to talk about a win-win, we call it a win-win-win because we think everybody wins in this one. It's true. You really are, if you're a node owner and the token was worthless forever, you still won. You still helped us do something good. Right. And so that's how we look at it. We look at it from the perspective of, are we able to solve problems in this world? That's the win for everybody.
Right.
Okay.
Everything else
your
is
children will
cherry
thank
on
you.
top.
Your grandchildren will thank you. Anything else that you guys can do with your Element blockchain and as a community to increase the value or whatever, that's on you. And if it works, fantastic. Win, win, win with exclamation points. But
Scott, thanks for your time.
thanks, Joseph.
We'll see you guys next time.